For many people, their home is both their biggest asset and their biggest expense. And the focus on property over recent years has spawned a slew of programmes dedicated to home renovation and construction. Grand Designs was first broadcast in 1999 and follows people as they plan, budget and build their dream home, often going wildly over budget, but always driven by intense passion for their project. Here's a taste from the end of the last series.
Was it all this effort worth it?
Absolutely.
I think it's been a very hard process, but a very enjoyable one. And now we've sort of come to the end of the hardest part of the work, and we can really enjoy it now. So I think it was worth it.
Well, these hybrid projects aren't for everyone, are they? I mean, it takes a lot of passion and commitment and vision and patience to see them through. You could argue that Andrew and Deborah took their time over this, but then you see, I think they've got a better building as a result. And there's another thing, and that is that whether you live in a new house, one that's 10 years old, a conversion, an old building, as our lives evolve and change over the years, so we also need our buildings to evolve with us. We need to be able to look after them. They need tender, loving care like we do. And the list of things to do, it's never a short one. Things are never really quite finished.
The man behind Grand Designs is, of course, Kevin McCloud, and he joins me now. Welcome, Kevin McCloud. Thanks so much for coming in. So Grand Designs has been around for over a decade. Your first show was in 1999, so you really are in a unique position to judge how the GFC has changed people's property dreams, especially in Britain, of course, with it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, around the world, regeneration projects, big architectural projects, tend to take the long view. It takes between, say, 5 years and 20 years for the big building projects to happen. So unlike the markets, building and construction tends to sort of override and follow these fluctuations much more slowly. But, of course, in home building and renovation, people tend to respond much more quickly, in a much more volatile way to what they have available. And what I've noticed is that whereas, say, 3 or 4 years ago, people would spend their way out of trouble and borrow and keep borrowing in order to achieve what they wanted, now people are being much more careful. So I see projects slowing down and construction at the domestic level slowing down, but people are still doing it.
But do they have to downsize their dreams a little? They get less high quality, for example?
Well, I think actually the opposite happens. I think when people are able to spend their way out of trouble, they just write cheques. When you have to work with limited budgets, what you end up doing with your design, your architects, and even yourselves, is devising really clever, creative solutions. And that is what design is. It's the creative solution to problems that doesn't necessarily cost more. It can usually cost less.
What do you think when you look at the Australian housing market? We do have a housing shortage here, and yet the tax situation favours buying an already built home rather than building your own. Are you surprised by that?
I'm surprised because it's the opposite of what occurs in the UK, where the favour is always in favour of the new rather than restoring and working with the existing. It's difficult because you have on the one hand availability of land, and land is relatively inexpensive here, but on the other hand you have big infrastructure problems. And I think there is that balance to be got between trying to find space which is affordable, and on the other hand trying to make sure that your utilities, your phone, water, electricity and so forth can be fed to the property, and that's a difficult balancing act. But I think on the whole, I think Australia is better blessed than some of the more populous, highly pressurised countries of Europe.
But we are still slowed down by taxes and by red tape. Should the authorities be more encouraging?
Well, it is interesting that I think that taxes, you wouldn't think this, but taxes are a primary driver with housing. They can make a very, very big difference. And I think a simple change in tax law could stimulate the market.
Now, looking at Grand Designs, the stories that we see on air are largely successful. They're finished. What proportion of stories do you begin with a project that simply go nowhere?
Well, over the years we've got better, I suppose, at smelling the duds out, and that is a very, very useful tool. I think now probably 1 in 20 we fail to see finish. And we tend not to broadcast them, of course. They tend to fall by the wayside.
Now, you focused on houses that are built to be as green as possible, as carbon neutral as possible. But is sustainability a growing element in people's plans, as well as planning the house layout and what type of windows to have?
Yeah, I think if you're going to build a house these days, to build it to be energy efficient, whether that's in terms of the heating you put in or the cooling that you put in, it's got to be a no-brainer, because with volatile fuel prices and the rising cost of energy, it seems to me that if you have the opportunity to put into the bones and the structure of the building measures which can effectively insulate you from that, that's people do that. They do that as a matter of course. And we did notice in the early series how we'd have these eco projects which were kind of separate and apart. And now actually people, as a standard measure, really are introducing environmental efficiency into the design of the building.
And how much advice do you give to people on that? Because that's something that you love. You're very passionate about
I work with
that.
the Green
Or do you
Building
stand
Council.
back?
No. I mean, funnily enough, off camera, I probably give more advice and work with the contributors more than I do on camera. Because on camera, my job is to act as the sort of interlocutor and be the viewer's friend. But off camera, I tend to do a bit. I do a lot of work with the Green Building Council and one or two other organisations in trying to promote green buildings. And I think we've got a long way to go yet. A long way to go. We've got to retrofit our existing stock, which is very significant.
And finally, what is it about human psyche when it comes to house building? What is it that pushes people to risk everything sometimes?
It is the same drive that pushes governments to build huge museums and ports, that pushes businessmen to build great vanity projects. It is the same drive that gets us up in the morning and makes us go to work. It is absolutely primal, and without it, we would all still be in caves.
Kevin McCloud, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.